And we are live. Hello, everyone. I am here today, Orna Ross speaking, for our member Q&A, where members of the Alliance of Independent Authors send us in their most pressing self-publishing questions. And as ever, we are here to answer them, we being me and Michael La Ronn. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Orna. I was going to say good morning, good afternoon, but I don't know when people are listening, but happy 2022.
Indeed. Morning where you are, just barely afternoon where I am, and heaven knows where it is, what time it is where people are. But it doesn't matter because our questions are timeless in the main. So the same issues arise for all self-publishers at different stages of the process. So you are the man with questions. And do you want to kick off with the first one today?
Yes, indeed. So our first question comes from member Robert, and he asks, I have a book formatted for 6x9 trim size, but I see that I have many different options. Is there a best in practice or best way to format a 6x9 book so I don't mess up?
So I'm not sure if the question is should he avail of one of these other choices, or whether 6.9 is 6x9 is a preferred format for certain kinds of books. So I'll kind of address both of those. The second one first. 6x9 is a very popular choice for nonfiction, and the advent of self-publishing has given us an awful lot more flexibility in terms of sizes. So book print sizes have always been dictated by economics. So the sizes that they kind of settled in on are slightly different in different countries because there are different economic conditions in different countries. But they were roughly decided by the maximum profit to the publisher based on the size of the book. And that's why most novels traditionally used to come in at around 70,000 words, because that maxed out on a consignment print of 3,000 to 5,000, which was the average sort of print run for a novel. So now, with print on demand, as the questioner rightly says, we've got lots and lots of different options, but authors have generally stuck with the standard sizes, and there are good reasons for doing this because particularly if you want to work with bookstores and libraries, because they tend to like you to keep to the standard unless you've got a reason for deviating. Obviously, illustrated books, children's books, stuff like that, sizes vary much more widely than with a straightforward book. Typically fiction now for POD, and this is not in any way a rule. So the first thing to say is it is up to you. The second thing to say is that if you go for a smaller format, you may well greatly improve your pricing on Ingramspark, and it is worth experimenting a little bit with that, because if you can get 3 copies of the book on a sheet, on one of their big sheets, the price comes in a little bit lower. So that is worth taking a look at. But generally speaking, authors are going for 6.9 for nonfiction, and something a little bit smaller, 8x5 or 8.5 by 5.5 for fiction. Do you have anything to add on sizing, Michael?
No, that's a great. That's something I had never thought of. I always knew about the economics of book printing, but that you would actually have a better price, better take-home pay, for lack of a better phrase, for having a smaller trim size. That's
Yes.
great.
Yes, it came home to me when I went to, we organised visits for ALLi members to Ingramspark in Nashville and here in the UK in Milton Keynes. And it was when I was first on one of those tours and saw the big machines and saw them coming through, and saw that sometimes they were getting 3 across on a sheet, and upon discussion discovered that yes, that could make a difference. So it means your cost is lower, and therefore you can apply a higher profit margin on the same price point for the customer.
Yeah, that's really insightful, because I think for many of the people listening, 6x9 is the default. It's certainly the default at Amazon KDP. I think that's what people kind of have burned into their brain, that's
Yeah.
what, that's what I should use. And, you just heard that maybe you should go lower because
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really interesting.
It is interesting, and I think there are two things. The two things to take into account here is kind of your wish as a publisher to maximize your profit, which is 100% what a publisher should do, and then there's reader preference. And but I don't think readers think much about these things half as much as we think about them.
Right.
They tend to kind of accept the book that arrives, and unless it is something that reads strangely, or the font is too big for the trim size. These are things that you have to take into account. So the trim size needs to be balanced with other factors about the book. But it's not rocket science, and I think it's well worth experimenting with. Yeah.
I agree, and I think that the next natural follow-up question to the question is, well, is there a best practice way of formatting a paperback? And I think the answer is not really. There's a few different ways. So once you determine on what format you want, you've got a few different options. You can hire a formatter if you want to do that. Certainly, you can go to our service ratings directory. We've got a lot of different formatters that we would recommend at ALLi to make sure that you're in good hands. That's the first option. The second option, which is probably more popular, is to use a formatting app like Vellum is popular for Mac. Atticus, which was just released by Dave Chesson, that's a popular solution now that's available on Mac, Windows, any kind of machine that has a internet connection, because it's an internet-based formatting app. And I've seen some results and tested Atticus, and I've been very pleased with the results. I really like where the app is going. Or if you really want a lot of firepower and you've got some money to spend, then you could use Adobe InDesign, which would help you with formatting a book. But there's no best practice on how to create one. It's just a matter of doing it. And there's also Microsoft Word templates. I mean, you can try it in Microsoft Word, but that's not for the faint of heart.
It's so fiddly. I could never
Oh
make
my,
Word
yeah.
work. Yeah. Atticus, you're so right, is really taking the community by storm, I think. And while it's still in very early stages and a little bit buggy in places, it's very good value for what it does. The great thing about using an app is that you can go back. If you hire a formatter, well, that is also great because it's off your desk and somebody else is putting in the time, and it's a very valid choice, particularly if you're not interested in formatting, or if it confuses you or upsets you or you're not. You need to be quite a stickler for detail to format well. Now, these apps do make that so much easier. I mean, I was somebody who always hired a formatter because I don't have that kind of attention to detail, but I think the apps really, they are foolproof almost. They really do help you to create a good product, even if you're not that way inclined, shall we say. The reason that I do it and don't outsource it anymore is because if I need to make a change, it's so much easier. If you've paid somebody to format your book and then you need to make changes, and really, as publishers, if not as writers, we find that we do need to go back in, change our back matter, improve something. Things are constantly changing in the indie space. So it's great to be able to go in and make those changes if you need to. Sometimes we find typos, or our readers or our reviewers find problems with the book, and we decide we'd like to go back in and make a minor change. And to do that's very easy with one of these apps, and not so easy if you've hired somebody to do it. Though formatters, I think, are getting used to the fact that indie authors publishing in a different way to the standard publisher, and so they are facilitating changes more than was traditionally the case.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So I had a book. I mean, I'm the same as you, Orna. I used to do my own formatting, and my hair would turn. I would just want to pull my hair out. I hated it. It was awful, especially with Microsoft Word. And I eventually hired a few people to help me with it. And I stopped doing that because then, like you said, the changes were kind of a pain. And sometimes you would have to pay extra to get something changed. But then what I started doing was I started using Vellum, and it was great. But one of the issues with formatting apps right now is that if you want to create a hardcover edition, once you get over a certain page count, things don't always work properly, even if you have a formatting app. So I actually hired a formatter last month, and the first thing they said was, "Hey, you can send us your Vellum file if you want, and we'll use that as the basis for, what we're doing." So they're definitely evolving, because they wouldn't have asked me that 5 years ago. So,
Absolutely not. Yeah,
or
and
even
things
2
are
years.
evolving. Even 2 years ago, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's great. And they're probably using it themselves in terms of improving their business too. So, yeah, as usual, indie authors leading the way and
Yes.
services and publishers catching up. So, yeah, lots to think about there if you're at the formatting and production stage of the book. But hopefully, there's some guidelines there that will help.
All right. Our next question is from Dara. And the question is, I cannot find show notes for your podcasts. Where are they located?
Oh, it's on the blog. So the podcast comes out every Friday, and on the blog post, which is on self-publishing advice. I'm trying to get this right, thinking as I'm talking. Selfpublishingadvice.org/podcast. You should find the most recent episodes there, and every Friday on the blog, essentially the show notes are located there. So yeah, if you want to check the blog, it's selfpublishingadvice.org/blog, and then just go to the Friday episode. We usually have a blog post each day, but a little bit of scrolling will take you there.
Yes, and it is podcast singular. So selfpublishingadvice.org/podcast. And yeah, and you can definitely use the search feature too. If you ever are looking for an old episode, or hey, did Michael and Orna answer this question on book formatting? I'll just type in book formatting, and you'll be able to find the theme of the episode.
Exactly. So all the most recent posts on book formatting will pop up in date order. So you'll get the most recent one first. Yeah. So the search function on the blog is underused, I think, in terms of when people are looking for answers to their questions. So people tend to, our members drop us an email, and that's absolutely fine. We're always happy to answer email, but do bear in mind, or they hop on the forum, the Facebook forum, and ask a question. And obviously that has the advantage of getting lots of answers from lots of other members. But the search function on the blog is always worth a look, because we're constantly revisiting these important topics as things change. So yeah, you get your responses in date order with the most recent ones first. So that's a good way to do it. And it includes both the podcast advice and the blog advice will come up for you.
All right. Our next question is from Robert, and he says, I've submitted my manuscript through Publish Drive, but I want to know how to obtain author's copies. Any help would be most appreciated. So it sounds like Robert is publishing his paperback through Publish Drive and wants to know how to get those author's copies.
Yes, I think that's a question for Publish Drive directly. So you need to talk to them. Publish Drive is an aggregator that works with a variety of different outlets for ebooks, and they also have the print book option now. So yeah, very helpful. And if you just drop them a note, they will tell you how best to do that. It may be a matter of going directly to Kindle or Ingramspark. I'm not actually sure how that works, and I would like to find out, actually. So it's something we'll follow up on, and perhaps the questioner can let us know how they go as well.
Yeah, I would say that's complicated. I know that people who have gone through aggregators in the past, that it's been a bit of a sticking point, because they have to pay a little bit more for author fees than what they typically like. So that is an option, or something to think about. A consideration is that if you do publish your paperback through an aggregator, nothing wrong with it, but just be prepared that you may have to pay more for things that someone who publishes on Ingram or KDP doesn't necessarily have to pay.
Yeah, so you're paying essentially for the convenience of them managing certain tasks for you, and obviously they have to pay themselves. So yeah, we're always, as authors, balancing this. Do I go direct or do I get help? And there is no right answer for it for everybody. But print, most indie authors go direct for print to Amazon KDP and Ingramspark and use that combination of the two. And again, this is back to what we were talking about when we discussed formatting. It's that control thing. You can go in and you can order your author copies yourself. You can go in and you can make your changes yourself. So we generally tend to recommend that people go directly to Amazon, and also, if they can, and this is ebooks first of all, if possible, directly also to the big outlets like Kobo Writing Life and Apple Books and perhaps Google Books and one or two others. And obviously you're balancing your time versus convenience and all these other matters, but certainly going directly to Amazon is makes a lot of sense. And then you can always use Publish Drive and Draft to Digital and other good aggregators in addition. So very often authors think it's either or, but most things in indie author land, it's both. It's and rather than either or. So do investigate and weigh up the convenience of working with the service versus the control that you get by going direct.
Agree. And here is another question that we get. It's kind of an old faithful, Orna. Dreten asks, where do I find the Ingramspark discount code?
Okay, so it's you need to log in to the member zone, and if you navigate then to discounts and deals, you will find it there among lots of other great codes and coupons and discounts and percentages off, which are provided by ALLi partner members. So that is a page that's well worth visiting at least once a month. It really does save our members the cost of their membership time, over and over and over again to avail of those codes. So we encourage you to log in more often, see what's going on in the member zone, and always take a look at the discounts and deals while you're there.
Yeah, I'm going to be availing myself of the Ingramspark discount code. I finally bought ISBNs over the holidays. So
Woo!
I
Milestone
finally,
moment, people.
yes, and my wallet is crying because Americans have to
Oh,
pay a lot of money for ISBNs. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to connecting with Ingramspark. So I maybe need that
right.
question for myself.
Great. Well, it is one of those discounts that's definitely well worthwhile, especially if you've got a lot of books and you have.
Yes.
So it is limited to five titles per month now. And so, you'll need to work your way through them. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's good. And I don't think you'll regret going over to the ISBN side. Though I know I do appreciate that they're not cheap, especially in US land. Here in Europe, there are a number of countries where they're completely free. But still, it's good to own the ISBN and feel you are the publisher of record for your print books.
Agree. All right. Next question is I cannot pronounce this member's name, so I apologize. But the question is, I'm looking to connect with a rights or translations agent. Does ALLi help connect with these individuals?
What we tend to do is the other way around. When we have members who get offers from rights buyers or agents, then we help them to make sure that it is a genuine offer, that the contract is what it should be. And we work with Ethan Ellenberg agency in New York for this. And Ethan has built up, obviously, over the time of working with ALLi and working with his own clients, built up expertise in this rights arena. So we don't connect authors and rights agents directly. And there are a number of reasons for this. Most agents have kind of strict criteria about what they're looking for. They're not open to all authors. So if we were to arrive, even with our best performing, say we were to just limit it to our entrepreneur members who are all kind of successful, working, high-earning indie authors, still an agent wouldn't want to see us coming with all our members because they wouldn't be able to help them all. Most agents specialize in particular genre or particular, when it comes to translation, particular territories, languages, and so on. So it's really a matter of doing your research into the people who are successfully trading in rights in your particular genre, in your particular country of interest. That's kind of what you need to do. And if you begin with Google search, that's a good place to begin. And then the book fairs are a very useful source of information for this. So the London Book Fair is one of the biggest rights fairs, and Frankfurt Book Fair. And if you use the website search, you can find agencies and publishers as well, small publishers who are interested in buying your kind of books. So it is a research job. It takes some time, but it's the same names keep popping up again and again. And you will see, what's important here is that you will see good outlets who are good rights purchasers who are actually investing in rights, because there are lots of so-called, in inverted commas, agents at the moment who are, well, they're not necessarily reliable. It's something you need to know about, and getting used to those names that pop up again and again is something that it's worth becoming familiar with if you want to make this a core part of your strategy.
Yes. All right. So our next question is from Lindsay. And Lindsay asks, I'm a U.S. citizen who lives in France. I'm employed full-time by a French company, and I independently publish my books in my free time. I recently discovered that any money I make as an independently published author, I must pay a self-employment tax of 15% to the United States government. Have you covered this topic before? And if not, how can you talk about how to navigate self-employment tax?
Well, yeah, big question mark. We are definitely not tax experts and consultants in every territory around the world. Definitely not. What we can say is that we have lots of members operating in different countries, and a lot of countries have tax agreements. So really, this is a question either for your tax person in the US who may know whether, so for example, here in the UK and the US have an agreement, and so you don't pay double taxation. That's really what you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid paying tax both in your country of origin and in your country of location. And there are ways to do that. And most European countries have agreements with the US. I can't say off the top of my head what the situation is with France. I do know, though, that we have a number of US citizens living in France who are members. So if this is one that might be worth putting in the member forum, and we could flag it to some of those members who would be able to talk to you about their own personal experience.
Yeah, definitely. I agree on the double taxation piece, and there's the international piece that you have kind of need to sort out with an accountant. But then there's also the how do you avoid taxes issue. And I think a lot of, well, I shouldn't say avoid taxes. We don't want to avoid taxes.
Get us in trouble.
Yeah, I got to be careful with the words here. I don't want to say that. I don't recommend the Al Capone strategy of tax evasion. But there is a more general question of what are some things you can do to minimize your tax liability. And certainly in the United States, and I'm sure this is true in other countries as well, the business entity that you set up has a lot to do with your tax structure. So if you're a sole proprietor, you're probably going to pay higher taxes when you start making a lot of money than maybe a corporation, right? And so these are questions you want to ask with your accountant and think about deductions that you can make in relation to your publishing business so that you can reduce your taxable income at the end of the year, because it is a surprise to people when they start making a decent amount of money, how much money they owe to the tax man. It's especially when you don't have it. That's like the worst position to be in.
Absolutely, and there is a sort of a management as a publisher issue here, that you need to recognize, especially if you have a day job, and a lot of us do, especially at the beginning. You need to probably be putting away half of what you're earning as an indie author in order to have enough to pay that tax bill at the end of the day. So just taxes, it's one of those inevitabilities, has to be dealt with. So it's worth putting a little bit of thought into it.
Agree. Okay. And the final question that I had slotted for today, Orna, is from member Joe. And Joe asks, is there a way, or does ALLi recommend a list of companies who specialize in poetry? So I'm assuming poetry publishers or people that are related to, that offer poetry services.
Yeah, so the thing you need, the only difference really as a publisher of poetry for you, the two things that come up all the time is the editorial. So an editor who has experience of working with poets and who has a poetic sensibility is one thing. And our list of editors, we have within that listing some people who specialize in poetry. And then the other thing is, depending on the kind of poems that you write and what your layout and structure and form of your poems are, you may need particular help with formatting, the question that we were talking about at the beginning. So the layout of the words on the page is important, very important for some poets, and unusual shape layouts and so on are commonplace among contemporary poets. So if that is you, then you will also need to give attention to your formatter and the formatting and their ability to do that. And the challenges are different for different forms. So different formats. So your poems in print is one thing, but your poems in ebook is another, and reflowable text challenges in your ebook and so on. I would recommend that we have a blog post about how to format an ebook, and it's worth just looking at that to understand the issues around poetry and reflowable text and ebooks. And we'll include the link to that in the show notes. But in terms of actually people who deal exclusively in poetry, there's almost nobody who deals exclusively with poetry, unless you're looking at a small publisher, that will license your rights as opposed to be a service that you pay for help. And there are very, very few, or we're not aware of any that are simply focusing on poetry, because it is still, in the self-publishing world, a minority sport. Poets are now beginning to self-publish more and more, but it is relatively, in book format, it is still relatively new. Still a tendency among poets to look for a publisher, to work with, or a hybrid arrangement, rather than taking hold of the reins and doing it themselves. So I think the message I'd most like to give about self-publishing poetry is that it's not all that different. There's really no reason at all why a poet can't do exactly what the novelists and nonfiction self-publishers are doing, and take control of the process themselves and work through the 7 stages of the publishing: the editorial, the design, the distribution, the production, the marketing and promotion. They're all really, really similar. There is no great difference. And there is a sort of an illusion that there is, that poetry and literary fiction are in some way kind of separate from all the rest, but they're not. They're just another genre. So it's really a matter of the books that we have that talk about our guidebooks to self-publishing, our blog advice and so on. It applies to you as much as it applies to anybody else, apart from those two exceptions that I was talking about.
Yeah, there's virtually no difference. I mean, the formatting is, like you said, that it's a bit of a bear. And I did remember I was looking up as you were talking about that. Drafted Digital back in August came out with poetry templates. So that might be something for our poets listening to take a look at. We're thrilled to announce our new poetry templates for Draft to Digital print and Draft to Digital ebooks. And these are tools that exist on their website. Once you log into your account and you're uploading your book, that allow you to create poetry books that might help some people. I just throw that out there. You know, Draft to Digital is always pretty innovative and thinking about new stuff. But yeah, other than that, there really is no difference. I mean, and if you look at if you look at a lot of the poets that are the indie poets that are doing a really great job on Amazon and other places right now, it's because they're doing exactly what fiction writers are doing. It's really that simple.
Exactly. And I think, you know, that sense of poetry as a minority genre is very much linked to traditional publishing, whereby you published in print from a small press into your own local territory. That's really where poets were. You had, you know, small minority journal that focused on one particular kind of aspect of poetry, and you tended to link up with them in some way and, you know, get a few poems published in some of those journals, and then eventually, you know, find a small press who would publish a collection for you and go from there. And because it was publishing into your own territory, there was a limit to the number of people you could reach, because, you know, there is a limit. Poetry is not the most popular of the genre. But the coming of self-publishing really has changed that. And once you've got a global audience, now there are enough poetry readers to actually sustain you. And we are seeing some poets do extraordinary things. And on Ingramspark, poetry is a poetry as a format is absolutely thriving. In print form. So, you know, there is really nothing to stop you just getting stuck in. And you need to understand that poetry is a macro genre like fiction and nonfiction. You need to understand where you fit, where your books are positioned within all the different genres that fall into poetry. So it's important that you, like in every other aspect of publishing, same for the novelists, same for the nonfiction writers, you need to really know your genre, know the competing authors in your genre, know what people are doing, and see where you fit in and position your book properly in terms of marketing and promotion. And then away you go. There is a shortfall of poetry promotion vehicles. It's a lot of the, you know, the book bubs and the written word media and so on. Poetry has not really come up there in terms of their attention as yet, but I predict that that will change. And because, you know, where there are readers, then soon there are promotional services. So yeah, the main thing is to get going at becoming a poetry publisher yourself.
Agree. All right. Well, those were all the questions.
Okay, that is it for this month. So yes, please do keep your questions coming. Every question that you ask and need an answer to helps somebody else. So we love to receive your questions, and the other way in which you can in between shows. So what happens here is our members submit their questions. Anybody can listen. Anybody who's interested in self-publishing can listen to this podcast and get an answer to the question, but only members can actually submit. Other ways in which members can get their questions answered is by emailing us directly or by asking on the ALLi Facebook forum, where you will get an answer not just from us, the team members, but also from other authors, because often there isn't one answer to a question. There may be different insights and examples from different perspectives, and in the forum you get the wisdom of the hive mind. So yes, looking forward to your questions for next time. We'll be back in February. Until then, happy writing and happy publishing. Bye bye now.
Take care, everyone.